All right, I think that's it. Okay, good. Good morning, everybody. We are we are live if we like it or not. We're ready to roll. So let's pray and we'll get the day started and we'll enter into prayer. I have a little reflection. It's not super long, but I wanted to share this with you as part of our Lenten reflection. So I'm going to share my screen here and we'll go from there. So 1 second as I share my screen. Okay. We place ourselves in God's presence. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Now, share this reflection with the beginning quote. A cursory read of the Synoptic Gospels gives one the impression that we are saved by giving alms to the poor. And so in reading and reflecting on that, I want to offer this Lenten message from Pope Benedict reflecting on the parable of the rich man. And so and Lazarus. And so in the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, the rich man is heedless of the poverty of Lazarus, who is starving to death at his very door. Both parables, the Good Samaritan and this one, show examples of the opposite of being concerned, of looking upon others with love and compassion. What hinders this humane and loving gaze towards our brothers and sisters? Often, it is the possession of material riches and a sense of sufficiency, but it can also be the tendency to put our own interests and problems above all else. We should never be incapable of showing mercy towards those who suffer. Our hearts should never be so wrapped up in our affairs and problems that they fail to hear the cry of the poor. Humbleness of heart and the personal experience of suffering can awaken with us a sense of compassion and empathy. The upright understands the cause of the weak. The wicked has not the wit to understand it. Proverbs 29. We can then understand the beatitude of those who mourn, those who in effect are capable of looking beyond themselves and feeling compassion for the suffering of others, reaching out to others and opening our hearts to their needs can become an opportunity for salvation and blessedness. And Lord, we just ask you to pause in that reflection to be able to give us the grace needed to look beyond ourselves, that none of our own material comforts prevent us from seeing the plight of the poor, the plight of you, the invitation of you to grow deeper and closer to you that you call us through the poor. And so bless this morning together. Help open our minds to be able to learn and grow together as a community serving the poor. And so in all this and the intentions that we hold in our heart, especially during this Lenten period, we ask you to bless this time in your name. Amen. And Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay, good morning, everybody. It looks like we have some good attendance here. Always glad to have the group of you together. I know the heart grows fonder. We have the 2 months between these affinity groups, and so it's nice to connect. It's nice to be able to see everybody and to be able to have this time together. From our last gathering, as you know, one of the things in building up community that we also just take time to kind of check in, make sure everybody's well, good, and is on target. And also to be able to just take a second to be able to learn and any feedback from our last gathering. And so, you know, our last gathering was on the theology of money, just as a reminder of kind of what we gathered about. And here we are in the throes of Lent, almsgiving, and obviously prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. But inside of that, wanted to share any takeaways, if anyone had any takeaways from the last webinar, as a good way to as a oh, there we go. We got hijacked, Ashton. Um, and so in one of those things, wanted to be able to and if I can, I could stop sharing mine.
Father O'Toole, can you stop sharing your
Oh,
screen? Thank you.
there you go. He is we don't mind you being the admin either. Jim. That's great. Anyway, and so one of those things that I just wanted to be able to take some time, if any of y'all had any feedback or other depth to our last webinar, this would be kind of the time to be able to process that. And I share that knowing that after we had that webinar, and I was talking to a couple of the OPs. One of the OPs had some good insight just about the historical or the family context of his own personal relationship with money. And I thought that that was an interesting angle or conversation, because what it did is it allowed these topics that we cover not only to be realized by each one of you and processed by each one of you, but that there's a lot of shared learning inside of that. So I just want to give it a quick second or a quick nod to be able to, if anybody had any feedback. But obviously the theology of money struck a chord with a few of you, and I was grateful for that. And obviously in its connection to our own family of origin and the work that and the ministry that we're called to, it has a great a great influence on the work that we do. So any thoughts, comments about the wrap up of the last webinar since we last talked? All right. Well, I wanted to give the nod, and that's why I did it. So again, thank you for those that did give some feedback from that last gathering. It was a very fruitful conversation, I felt. Okay, as y'all know, our continued theme for this year is our growing in community. And I'm going to share my screen going back to at least to be able to start us off is our Lenten reflection here. But the title for today and what we're going to be talking about today, the mission, connectedness with the what and the why we do through our annual report. And so for many of y'all, you may or may not be familiar that Cross Catholic Outreach, like many nonprofits in our in the world, put out an annual report. A lot of times that annual report is backward facing for those that don't know. So what happens is you release in 2024, the first quarter or early part of 2024, basically the numbers or the impact from the year prior. And so it's a great snapshot, but we're going to be diving into that, actually going through the report, kind of processing it, what it means to each one of you in the practical way of you presenting and promoting and inviting into the mission of Cross Catholic. So it's obviously unique and needs to be tied to. We need to be tied to the mission, not only of Jesus Christ, obviously, as a Catholic ministry, but also into this very work. And the annual report's a good reminder and way to be able to do that. So forgive me, but for a little humor, a little context for this, every time that I share about the mission, my mind goes to this. So in the Catholic context, for those that are early 90s buffs of movies, I guess, is that's not your local parish priest. That's Jeremy Irons, I believe is his name. And Robert De Niro was in it. There was a number of folks. And so every time we would push out the mission, I was like, they're going to think I'm talking about the movie. And I do love that movie. And funny enough, my cousin, who's a Jesuit priest, I've heard some neat, unique stories to connect to that mission and the mission down in South America. And although our work does have similar nature to that, we are not talking about the movie today. So this is no movie critic review today. But the topics for today that we're going to do is we're going to break open the annual report. That's going to be the beef of this gathering and the beef of this conversation that we have. One, to be able to ask questions. Two is to be able to just not only let it simmer, but also kind of see how this becomes a realistic document for us every year and should be as part of as fundraisers. And it's a growth as a fundraiser to be able to be connected and feel connected to the annual report, not just as something that kind of gets put out there, but something that you feel a part of or can be a part of in future years. And then we're going to do some development of stories from the report, talk a little bit more about amplifying our message for the poor. And then I want to it's a little bit of a pivot connected, but I want to make sure we address today the opening up of the invitation for our first time givers and kind of spending some time in that area. And so with that being said, our annual report is this is the cover of the annual report that came out for 2023. And so before you judge that we're behind already, that is the typical and the norm for a nonprofit is to be able to capture the information from the past year and then share that kind of proactively going forward. It took me a little while kind of being in the nonprofit space to understand, like, why are we doing this in the past? But it really is as a tool for communication stewardship. Obviously, I love the cover of not only of the report, but I love the cover and how engaging it is. There's so much there. One, joy. One, just exhilaration. Two, obviously the food, the mission work of it. You could see from the field behind her and this tub that she's excited for the plentiful corn that she's been given. And at the same time, it's when we share those emotive photos, those photos that bring emotion to our donors and to us. It helps tell our story. And so the words growth and transformation just are really powerful ways to be able to tell the story. It's growth, obviously, as a correlation to the food that they grow, but also the transformation of what the donors can be a part of that story and are a part of that story to help grow and transform. And so I thought the cover was just unique and powerful. So why another report? Didn't we just do this last year? So the answer to that is no, we didn't do a webinar on annual reports. Yes, Cross Catholic did do an annual report last year, and they will do one next year. And we do this. That's what we do as nonprofits. We put out annual reports as part of our main mission of what we do. And so in the very title of it, the what and the why we do it, I figured it would be good for you first, just as a general piece, to know the why of the annual report. Why is an annual report even important for us to talk about? Why is it, why are we kind of getting into this fancy report? I've had donors literally tell me, gentlemen, when I was working at Boys Hope, you put out this annual report, you mail it to P, and my sister got it 2 copies. Your mailing was off. My work got a copy. I got a copy. What is this? Why are you wasting money? Just use that money for the kids anyway. And so some of you may have heard those excuses, and my rebuttal to that is that this piece has multiple functions in the nonprofit world, and they can't be overlooked because it is that important. One is it's one of the main overarching tools of communication back to our supporters, our benefactors. In addition to that, it is one of the 7 ways they say when you give a gift in the nonprofit world, you should thank the donor 7 times in 7 different forms of fashion. This is one of the main ways of thanking the donor, that they feel appreciated and that their name oftentimes, especially if it's a higher level, can appear on there as a benefactor inside of the report. So it's very utilitarian in that way, thanking donors. It's also to be able to give programmatic and operations reporting so that people know what's going on. That's oftentimes when we're close to the threshold on a nonprofit, that doesn't mean that they're close to the threshold on the nonprofit, that they don't know what's going on. This is so that during the year you could say, oh yeah, no, we have a thing to keep people informed about what's going on, or kind of this new initiative or something else that's happening. So this is an important part for each one of you to kind of feel that you can not only properly respond, but respond in a way to each one of those donors that come to you and be like, hey, what is going on in Cross Catholic? Like, you should see our annual report. It's really powerful. It's on our website. And you should see that as a way that it's a communication tool. In addition to that, we know that the financial reporting is not only important in our world, but it's absolutely necessary. As we talked about before, financial transparency of an organization's finances leads directly to ownership. They've done studies on it. It ties to the ownership of the donor. How do you share organizational ownership? Sometimes we're able to remove ourselves from the sheer ownership of an organization by saying, oh, that's that ministry. Well, they've done studies to say, like, what changes a person's perceptions to just say, oh, this is just Jim Kavanaugh's ministry, or this is that Catholic Church big ministry. The studies that they've shown to do that is when you are transparent and show basically the things that you need to be able to know of, like, what this organization is, it changes the mental connection to feel the ownership of the people. And then the last one is to be able to amplify the message. We've talked about each one of you being that amplifying voice and being able to replicate that voice. And this tool is for that, one of those purposes. And so we're going to go through each one of those as we kind of go through the report. But I think it's important to be able to say, why we're going through another report and why this annual report is so important is because we need to break down each one of those. And we're going to do that by kind of looking at, by being able to look at the report together. So I guess the first question I had for you, and this might be just a little bit of a show of hands, it doesn't have to be anything official. Has everybody seen the report yet mailed out? Because I know it's kind of been through most communications. If you haven't, oh, good, there you go. We even have printed copies of it. There you go, Charlie. And I think part of that is what we try to do, even as a staff here at our foundation, the other nonprofits I've worked at, is when the annual report comes out, although that's kind of the duty to put out from the communications team, it then shifts after that duty is over to be able to say, okay, how comfortable do you feel with this document? How can you kind of talk through that if you ever, one, in your preaching, if it ever comes up, but then two, in any other conversations, especially from the back, that you're using this as a constant resource that you're kind of going back and forth with. And so, so I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go through the report together. And be able to kind of open that up for this year's report, but doing that in a way that allows us to kind of talk through without it being just boring or me talking to you, kind of opening up each piece. I've seen situations where parishes have used kind of an annual report. It's not often. And the reason why I wanted to bring up that point before we kind of open this up is some people would say, well, I've been in parish life for a long time as we have nonprofit status, whatever, our diocese, and I've never seen an annual report. I've been in a diocese and I haven't seen an annual report. And my answer to that most of the time is it could have been, you should have been, but it doesn't always happen in the Catholic setting for parishes and dioceses for a couple reasons. One is they are time consuming to put together. It takes a commitment from your communications team to be able to stop and go gather the stories, gather the numbers. This is not a financial document. Remember, the difference between in a nonprofit organization is there's an audit, and that's required by the IRS to be able to have an audit of your documentation or even of your bylaws, which is the rules governing your nonprofit. Inside of your bylaws, you may have an audit required and mandated. That's a financial snapshot of the organization. That is not your annual report. Their financial reporting inside of an annual report, but and it could be off your audited numbers, but this is not the same as an audit. And I think that that's important for you to know in case one, you ever had another ministry, you had your parish and somebody says, oh, is this that thing that you have to do for your finances? Say, no, no, this is not required. And that is part of the reason why parishes and dioceses oftentimes don't have an annual report. And again, so hopefully you kind of start getting a little bit a world view of like, hey, why do we do this? Why do we need this? Why hasn't my parish or diocese ever done this? Because it's not required by law. That's an important piece. This is a piece that is really put together for an organization to do those things that I just listed: communications, building ownership, being able to amplify the story, transparency. Those are the things that really help spread this document out from just regular putting numbers in your bulletin or just telling a story or two. It's a concerted effort to be able to thank donors, engage, and bring people in. I know I feel like I'm ranting here, but I felt the educational side of this would be good so that you know the delineation between nonprofit communications and why this report is even being put out and what's good for you for this. I'll pause there. Any questions? Does that make sense? Has anybody ever been in a parish that's done an annual report? Has anybody ever been in a diocese that does an annual report? Some of them good, bad, and different?
Having been a pastor, we always did annual reports. Our diocese, Archdiocese St. Paul, Minneapolis, always does annual reports. I can't imagine not doing an annual report. People in St. Paul, Minneapolis expect accountability. So it's not a surprise.
No,
So,
that's fantastic. That's good feedback to hear that some dioceses kind of see and value. I love the word you use, Father, which accountability. I mean, that's really it's a form of accountability for the donor, for the organization. Our diocese does not put out an annual report. Now, that's not throwing us under the bus. I'm just saying that doesn't happen. Yeah, you don't don't read that in any other way. Father Dave?
So I'm from Massachusetts, and the diocese of Massachusetts for the longest time did one, and they required one of parishes to share one. But I have to say, what happened, it wasn't done professionally. And what ended up happening was many places, including one of my parishes where I went to church as a kid, there was abuse of power. And what they did was they actually listed parishioners' names and how much they gave. And they called that the parish report. And so people wanted to be there, not only see, so they started comparing what they gave to other people, and the priest would give a little, a little summary of it and things like that, but you wanted to be able to keep it. And so a bishop came in and got rid of that whole concept and so it wasn't really a professional business aspect of this. It became just a listing of names and how much you gave for the year. And that became the parish report. And as you can imagine, how that creates insider-outsider relationships and all kinds of problematics when you're comparing yourself to other people. And of course, the poor, are always on the lower part of it. And so anyhow, my diocese got rid of it in the early 70s, Springfield, Massachusetts.
That's really insightful. And what I like about that, Father Dave, is claiming a space for each one of you to know what it's not done or how it can be misused, which is a great perspective of like the misuse of it is it can be, if this is just to be able to build the pride of our top donors, well, that's not the most altruistic motivations for the organization, right? I mean, it's not fully building ownership. It's just scratching backs in that way. And when you're scratching backs, sometimes that doesn't sustain, it doesn't last long, but it doesn't also serve its utmost purpose, which is to be able to really to put forth this ownership document. And so I like that you shared about the misuse of it, because yes, although I wasn't going to talk about it much, I could probably spend 10 minutes just on other organizations I know that have misused their annual report in that way, unfortunately. And it's not just a donor tool to be able to build pride, and that's a fantastic point. Anybody else have an experience through an annual report in their diocese organization, another nonprofit? Yes, Father Farrell.
In Providence, since just before I was ordained, it was made a requirement of every parish to publish their annual report and insert it or publish it within the parish bulletin and give a good explanation of it. Not everybody did it. Around our time in Providence, Father Dave, what you mentioned was always called the scandal report or the scandal sheet. And as a result, my father would not use the budget. And so our name always appeared on the street we lived and everything else as give us 0 per year. But the annual report in our diocese has always had a top priority. Even the diocesan report is published in the diocesan newspaper every year. It's as an insert, the complete thing, breakdown in terms of all the areas of mission, etc. So been there, done that, bought the T-shirt, and wore it out.
Yeah, that's really good insight, and I love although the wording, the scandal report. I do, it is affirming to be able to, when you hear those kind of things, to be able to drop back and to be able to say, what are the motivations of this document? And I think the beauty of Cross's annual report that we're about to go over, and hopefully any organization that you're involved with, is that it meets some of those criteria that we just talked about: thanking the donor, not manipulating the donor, that it's a conversation around true communications, programmatic reporting, ownership, financial transparency. Those things done well. I've seen an annual report, literally, it looks like a word file that they just dumped 6 of their bulletins into this mumbo jumbo, and they put the title annual report over it. And it's like, that's not engaging. The idea of this is to truly to build ownership. And you do that by evoking emotion, and kind of in the same way that you do verbally every weekend, you kind of doing that with a document. So without further ado, we'll jump in. Father Dave, you have something? Yeah, sure.
Corey, can I just add one more piece? I think your explanation about this is really good. I just want to reiterate for the fathers here, transparency is part of our hedgehog principle here at Cross Catholic, right? And that's been very big for Jim and Brian from the very, very beginning. And in fact, we want to become the most transparent charity in the Catholic Church in the world. You often hear Jim say that. And so that's why, this annual report is good. That's why we're constantly sending out mailers to people who have donated. It's part of that hedgehog principle that we have. So it's really important. And for a lot of people, this kind of conversation might be off-putting because it may sound business-like. But the bottom line is, Jesus several times in the gospel talks about the importance of strategizing. Like if you look at Luke 14:28, Jesus tells the story about, suppose that one of you wants to build a tower, and, you want to sit down and estimate the cost to see whether or not you can finish it. So this notion of that might be a business kind of language really is a spiritual conversation as well, because it's about stewarding our donors' gifts, and also keeping them informed, and that it's imperative that we do this. So I appreciate the fact that we're having this. So thanks, Corey.
Yeah, no, so well said. And again, thanks for each one of you to be able to dive into this, because the more that we do this and the more that we have these conversations, the more refined we become. And what happens is if you like it or not, it shows in your preaching. It shows in the way we hold ourselves and talking about Cross Catholic. It shows in being able to kind of have this joint message that, like, they are committed to these things. And so when a donor is able to come back and say, hey, are you familiar with Cross Catholic? That's that organization. And the identifying qualities that they're going to put to this are exactly what we're kind of strategizing here, talking about. And we want to kind of drive home. And we'll talk about this at the end, when we talk about amplifying the voice. But what it does is it helps, to Father Dave's point, is it helps unify our message. And that's that hedgehog principle you're talking about. So like you'd say, look, our desire is to be transparent. And when you share that, transparent's not a word that you could share lightly. You have to back that up with action. And the way that you back that up with action is a prolific report like the annual report to say, here's the numbers. This is who and what we've done. This is based off audited material. And I could promise you, if you handed, and I know this is beating a dead horse a little bit, but bear me out. But if you came and just handed a donor an audit, guess what they're going to do? They're not going to read it. We know that there's a line of ownership that people want, but they also don't want to be bored. And that the majority of people that are CPAs and accountants may look at it, but the reality of annual report is kind of taking all these pieces of an organization and massaging them in a way that makes it consumable for the donor and consumable for the public. And so if we just put out a report with just numbers, people are going to be, they're out, they're going to be gone. And so understand that in this, if it feels a little fluffy and light and emotional, it's meant to be that, because it's meant to be consumed by the public, not just an auditor. And to that point, it's not required. So,
I think that's good, Corey. Charlie speaking. Yeah.
yes, sir.
I used to have a little, when I was first ordained, being, putting out some information on religious life and things like that. But I think this last one has been great with Michelle right there. Woman, look at us today, all male. And yet it was done very good. They got Jim and Michelle there together in prayer, which is a nice shot. And then this year in review is excellent. It's just kind of the basics. And so just I have some thoughts on that. Most of the parishes I'm going to, right from the first phone call to the parish, I'm dealing with mostly women running the parishes. And then there's great deacons. Recently, a deacon and his wife were there. So it's going on in the pews too, if we look out. You guys might take more, asking the OPs what they're seeing, but I'm seeing more women and worshiping every Sunday than men. That's my little spiel for the beginning here. Thanks, Charlie.
No, it's good, Charlie. I appreciate that. And no, it's good insight. So I'm going to take that without further ado, and I'm going to share my screen with the annual report, and we're just going to kind of go through that as some talking points that I wanted to pull out, just to be aware of and to be able to utilize. So with that, let me share my screen here. Okay, so you should be able to see the annual report as it's on the screen. So as we talked about the cover, it also brings, this is, I believe, the first full message again from Michelle as we put out the annual report, knowing since the transition. And it's so nice to be able to, as you're saying, the lay leadership, the female leadership, the connection to the organization. It's good to be able to put that out there and to be able to have a face to a name. Interesting enough, I'm going to zoom in here, but part of the gift that you have from an organization such as Cross, when you get into communication, is being able to say who's in charge. A lot of people say, well, I don't know who do I call? And a lot of times it is a little scary for an organization to go put out your leadership, because a lot of times people are like, I'm going straight to the top. I know you've heard that before. Like, I'm going to bring this to the top person. And so it's a way of also just being vulnerable and transparent, of just like, here it is, here she is. And this is what we do. And so quite impressive that it's there and it's put out there for us to be able to talk about. I scrolled down to the part where it says fiscal review. If you could see that, and I zoomed in a little bit so you could see, but basically, I don't know, even if you don't talk about it often, here's one really key and powerful piece to this. When you start to break down numbers, people get excited when it has to do with impact. You're like, okay, when you give us $1, how many countries do you think Cross Catholic impacts in this world? And when you're able to turn around and say, we're in 33 countries that received aid, that's a mind-blowing number to the person in the pew, that we're not just in one country being able to just kind of dump this money, or like that your money truly reaches a global church here by going to 33 countries. That is a fascinating statistic that should be one of pride, that can help drive home the number. I can say, look, we're in a few countries across the world, but when you say 33, it helps really provide a mental note of like just how deep and wide the service is. Obviously, the number of projects supported, close to 300. And what I would think is one of the most important stats of ownership and financial transparency is that we're not just saying around 5%, around 6%, 5.97% is the expenses used for overhead costs. I don't know if you've ever run anything for 6%, but that's basically taking $1 and being like, okay, you have 6 to yourself, go do something else with the other 94. That's a really hard ask. That's a really, really, really hard ask. Organizations that I know, national organizations that have run similar numbers, have literally driven their percentage of overhead costs into the high 20s and 30s. And so when you have an organization that not only is charitable, but has global outreach for 5.97%, it is it's quite staggering. I saw Father Allen, your hand up, so I'm going to stop sharing the screen just to entertain that question. I want to make sure we have them as we go. What would you like to share, Father?
A couple things. One, in the report, one of the things I liked, it also brought out that since we were established in 2001, that we've been in over 90 countries. And I like to highlight that. It gives a more expansive, I think, feel. And I also was very pleased to see that we were able to hold our own on stewardship, just dipped a little slightly from the previous year. But I think we've all seen how everything has gone up in cost. So I was very pleased that we were able to hold the line, so to speak.
It is, and a lot of times you can't appreciate that number, and thanks for that insight, Father, because you can't appreciate that number until you work for an organization that doesn't have a 5.97%. And I know sometimes it's annoying because you're starting to look at every penny and every dollar and making sure it's spent the right way. But the reality of the backside of that, the pride is that you're able to say, like, this is where this money's going. It's going to the poor, and you could say that with conviction from the altar. And that's a really amazing spot. And then the last point, Father Allen, I like the expansive. Since we started, we've served over 90 countries. It's a great way to be able to expand that number, but have an actual number to kind of go at. I haven't seen that number, but I take your word that that's kind of since the start of it. And I'm sure it's somewhere. I just didn't see it recently. So
Yeah, it was in the report. I forget what page, but it was in one of the narratives.
Okay, I didn't see that. That's fantastic.
And I think, it can dovetail that with, we've been in our almost 23 years of existence, we've been in over 90 countries, and we're currently active in 33.
That's amazing. I like that. And I like that currently active. Father Brian?
Yes. I just wanted to mention that for the guys using the brochures, obviously right now, because we're using the brochures based on previous information, don't be afraid to use the numbers as they occur in the current annual report, because it's easily explained. The numbers of countries and projects are different from the brochure to the annual report. So I would suggest that we all use the most recent numbers. I don't think anyone's going to get hung up on it in terms of in the pews, but at least that way our message is consistent across the board, no matter where we are.
No, that's a fantastic reminder. In fact, I thought about that at one point in time, so I'm so glad you brought that up, because it's a reminder to be able to say your most important news is the news right in front of you on the brochure. And although this is kind of the next dive in, not everybody's going to get the annual report and those numbers. And so for it to not feel as if it was counter information to what they're getting you want to make sure that that is consistent. So very, very well said, and appreciated that point.
And
Are-
the good thing there, I think, is, you know, the way I generally express it is, you know, over 94% of what we receive from you, the good people of God, goes to our missions projects around the world and not to administration. And so you don't have to make any real changes there because it's so negligible. It still is over 94%. So you don't have to get down to the nanos on that. But there was a little variance in the countries. We went from 36 to 33, but that oscillates. And I think a lot of that has to do with politics and logistics, integrity, and things like that, that sometimes get in the way of doing the good we'd like to do.
Amen. That's good. It's really good. All right, I'm going to jump back to the screen. We're going to go back into kind of diving into the report here. So help me here while we go. All right, here we are. So you'll see a couple things, and I wanted to make it just a mention of this. You know, sometimes we talked about in your aid before you get to a parish that sometimes you can you'll go and you'll know that it's like a Colombian community or a community that's more Honduran or whatever. And so sometimes you can get into very specific numbers as a way to be able to help tell the story better. You may not want to get into the weeds, you may want to, but if you want to, this is a beautiful way to be able to do that so that one, when you're able to kind of nail the numbers down to this level, it's beautiful because you're able to say, this is where the help's going. Look at the help that we dumped into these countries. And as you know, those conversations help when you be able to, you know, when you ever said, you know, that there was like, for example, the money that's going into Honduras, and you would say, well, man, that's quite a number compared to, you know, Jamaica. So sometimes it might come up in a question like, how do we get to Jamaica? And it allows you to be able to say, well, we also have this network of aid that happens, and it's partners in this aid that we're able to do to be able to push money not only into these communities, but to do it way where we know it's going to have its greatest impact. Or this is where Cross started in its ministry and really has a foothold in being able to help really transform that community or that country. And so so I share that with you just to be able to say this could be something that you really want to be able to dive into as part of that. Always love maps. Maps are a great way to be able to point the donor back to the conversation. And I would say, you know, look where you are on this map and look where your dollar reaches. You couldn't send a stamp there for that amount. I mean, you could kind of say it almost in an exaggerated way, but look how far your dollar reaches when you're able to give a gift to Cross. It shows the great impact of a global network of not only our faith, but of our human aid. And obviously this next piece is so powerful when it comes to telling stories and what we're going to break open when we talk about telling stories, that you're able to say, obviously what I always like to remind y'all and to be able to continue to be able to push and encourage you is when you're trying to seek alignment with that weekend's gospel, I always say, go back to this because it's a great way for you to be able to mentally line up health, housing, education, disaster relief, and some of those stats that help you break open a story that could possibly align to your preaching in the current gospel and to kind of how you want to tell Cross and the impact. And if you're looking for those ways in that category, this is a great way to be able to break open, like, especially if you're talking about health or housing, and you're able to say, well, man, we've put 35 projects in 18 countries in just in 2023. And those are current stats that really engage people and build ownership, but it also drills down to the exact area that you want to be able to preach on. Okay, Father Bauer, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I just back to the countries. I was delighted to see that Jamaica was back in the mix.
Yep.
And I remember what Monsignor Ted used to use the example that $100 would feed a family of 4 in Jamaica for a year. And I might start incorporate that again because that really blows people's minds. They can't imagine that.
Yeah, no, it is. And it is good to be able to see that the worldwide impact. Father Carlos, go ahead, jump in.
The map, in many ways, affirms who we truly are, Catholic, because it really shows it in print, and people always
So
comment
true,
about that.
so
to me.
true.
So I just wanted to add that.
May I say something?
Absolutely. Please, Father Kunzman.
I just want to say that I saw when we list the countries that China receives money from us. And I've had people tell me they would never give to us if we're helping China. Did I come across?
You did. I wasn't I didn't know if you were there was another point. You were just saying that people said that they would not give if they knew that Cross was helping China.
Exactly.
One, that's surprising. Two, I would think, this is just me out loud, you obviously you don't want to get into like this, this war of words, if you will, with a donor or with somebody. But at the same time, if it's not your focus and you're not sharing that, but I would say my initial response, I think, to somebody, especially in a fundraising element, is to be able to say, you know what, we find opportunities where God's grace can make an impact on people. And we know that sometimes crosses political boundaries and ideological boundaries from our own beliefs. And I think that's, without it feeling like that it's theirs, like we have an opportunity to partner with somebody to be able to help. And it's as a Catholic mission organization, what a beautiful gift to be able to have that aid with inside a communist country. I mean, and I know it could go down a rabbit hole quickly. But I share that just because I think that's there's so much more an opportunity of growth and impact than it is of limitation of saying, yeah, I'll tell them we need to get out of China. Anyway, Father Dave, did you have any insight on that?
So how Jim speaks to this often, even the political reality in the United States, right? That our goal is to feed the poor, right? It's not to get into political realities. And if people can't see the the paradigm from the gospel in the corporal work of mercy of feeding the poor, clothing the naked, then that's going to be their decision. But that's our goal. Our goal is not to support politics. Our goal is to do the corporal works of mercy. And so whatever it is, I mean, whatever country it is, I mean, we just mentioned China, but whatever country it is, the issue is there are starving people, there are hungry people need a home. We're not supporting the politics. So Jim is very clear to say that to us internally a lot.
And that's a good point, because China, a lot of people don't understand. And if you know any Maryknoll missioners, they experienced getting booted out or executed there. And the underground Catholic Church in China needs desperate help. And that's what we need to focus on, is the plight of the church in these areas. I don't like the politics of China either, but I know there's a lot of good people there that are desperately in need of our help.
There are people who have talked to me about not wanting to help in Haiti or in Nicaragua because of the political situation. What has been helpful for me is when I have understood how we partner, and that we're partnering with Catholic communities. And even in China, there is a direct way that the church goes in, the Universal Church goes in to care for Catholics in that community. So I think it has been helpful anyway. I know it's helpful for me to know how the resources that we have are brought into the community, specifically by way of the universality of the church.
Bob, can I just dovetail on it? That's such an important thing for us to know, but even periodically to say to people when we get questioned. I don't, like we're in Cuba right now. I helped make the connection through the Order of Malta. I'm a chaplain of the Order of Malta, the Cuban Association. The bishops of Cuba have approached the Order of Malta because as people leave the island of Cuba any way they can, they leave behind their starving parents and grandparents. So the bishops dealing with this tragedy have started 7 feeding centers across the country, and they've approached Cross to provide the food. So once a day, when they bring these people together in these comedores, these feeding centers, they have mass, they pray the rosary, they may play backgammon, they socialize. They give them 1 hot meal a day, and it's our food that we pack in food packings. So we have actually sent 2 trailer loads of food, 2 ocean containers of food there. But it goes to the bishops, and they're the ones that dispense that to where it's needed. So, again, you may not want to preach on any of that, but I just wanted to share that with you. Because again, some people might say, oh, you're supporting Cuba, whatever. No, we're doing the corporal works of mercy.
Question. You bring up a good point, David, and you have a specific mission you're talking about. And I'm sure there's a way that I just haven't found on your website or whatever. Where does the $12,000 in China go to? I'm sure it goes to help like the church underground, but I'm just sometimes curious as a preacher, how and does it help people? And you're addressing that for Cuba is really very good. Now, I have more of a question about where does our money in Nicaragua go? Nicaragua is a very repressive government. Our bishops have been in jail and what have you, and they probably need our help more than anybody else. But is there a specific way we can go and Google this country on your website to find out where does the $12,000 go? In China, I mean, $12,000 might go a long ways, but it probably just keeps the desperate leadership of the church from starving themselves. Who knows? But I would be curious to know. Anybody know the answer to that?
Well, could we do this? Because I don't want to take away from, these are really important questions, and you might want to send others. Ashton, can they send those questions to you? And maybe what we can do is, and Corey, I don't want to hijack your workshop here.
That is good.
But-
I'm glad we're having a conversation
What we
with
can do
you.
is send Ashton those questions, and what we'll do is we'll create like an FAQ kind of thing so that we can send you back all this information that you're looking for, because I think these are really good questions. And then what we can do is then we can figure out where is it not present on the website, and we can bring that to our Marcom community people as well. So raising really good questions, but send those to Ashton, and then we'll send you back some talking points, to help you.
No, that sounds good. And I'm so grateful for the questions, because what this is doing is this is building ownership with y'all, right? I mean, this is that way. So good work. Keep asking them. We'll get those questions answered. And this is really one of the byproducts of being able to dive into the annual report, so that we all can speak to this much more eloquently, much more positively, but also with eyes of impact. Yeah, we want to know, where's this money go and how it is, even if it's a broad stroke explanation. This is good work. So keep the questions going, put them in the chat, email Ashton, email whoever, email me, email Father Dave, we'll get it answered. I mean, there's no doubt about it. All right. So just in jumping back, we talked about the annual report and the power of storytelling. And the power of storytelling is that so that you could also adopt some of these stories, and that they know that we know that not everybody has been back on mission trips yet, or we're trying to get there. Well, until then, you need to be able to come up with new stories, new ways to be able to tell that story. This great way of the Haiti mission, it's a great way to be able to continue to share a story and to be able to share impact. Here's what I love about it. Charlie, you went and you printed a copy of this. This doesn't mean that you can't not have a copy of this. Although it's not your brochure, if you're trying to expand your stories, there is no greater picture. I mean, right here, look at that smile, look at the chalkboard. Look at, what it does. It tells so much about how Cross educates and feeds. And right here, you just have the information, the stories, and some stats around it. And so, some of this stuff is built in for you to be able to take and regurgitate in a way that allows it to be fit within your homily, but also to fit within your ask or your pitch of Cross Catholic. So I continue to say that, you know, when we get stories and you get stories of people, it's great because when you have pictures that bring this alive, we know the power that that brings to donors across the board. It allows you to be able to say, you know what? And remember, in our storytelling, how do you tell from a new perspective? You know, when's the last time you've gone out and you telling, I'm hypothetically saying this to parishioners, to you, to be able to share with parishioners. When's the last time you've gone in your garage and you've kind of kicked a white bucket out of the way, an old paint bucket, to just get out of the way because you stored up and you saved an extra one? Well, what if I told you that was the vessel to bring life-saving water to communities? That we put wells in and that water, so that same bucket that you just kind of move away is not only a revered resource, but it's the story of, and then you're able to tell the story of Malawi, and you're able to tell the story of Wells, and you're able to tell the story of these two individuals. It's using a way that a donor can connect. Everybody can connect to a bucket. And then how does that bucket transform lives, and how do you fill up that bucket for someone? So it's those kind of stories that allow you to be able to share. You know, there's definitely a lot of poetic connection to be able to have, you know, continued stories of children, to be able to tell stories of kids in masks and being able to say, you know, everybody wears different masks, and we have this, and you have this abusing going on, and these different stories that are really painful, but that you're bringing the donor. Remember that the story arc, the narrative arc, and just bringing that back to you. The narrative arc is what? Is that the donor is the rescuer, is the person helping, stepping in and helping. They're solving the story. They are the hero or heroine in the story. Obviously, with God's grace, they're not replacing God, but they're co-partnering in this work of the Lord by being able to give a gift. And you're able to tell that story from annual reports that have stories like this. Before I go to the next story, and Father Bao will get to you, I wanted to be able to share, you know, the very reality of when you're able to tell stories is to be able to give people what I would call their peer connection. So the power of this last story of mobilizing U.S. Catholics to bless the poor is being able to help tell the story of peers just like you, using words like generous people just like you across the country have used the Box of Joy program to be able to place themselves not only in feeding, and the stats are here, the 106,000 children, but also to be able to tell the story of motivating individuals and donors to take part in this, to bring them to action. The obvious of a story is to bring to action, not to just end with the story, but to be able to say, and so you can make a difference in this. You can join this person. You can do these kind of things by being able to participate. And then my last point before I turn it over to Father Bauer for Father Bauer's question, I don't want to assume anything here. So if you don't know about the QR code, I'm pointing it out to you on the screen here. It's a red jumbled box, okay? These are not going anywhere. They've become more and more popular, not only in the nonprofit world, but a QR code is so that you can take this phone, open your camera app, and when you open your camera app and point it towards there, basically it sends you to the Cross Catholic page for Joy, the Box of Joy, so that they can learn more. So basically what we're doing is an annual report is able to transform somebody from reading into action. Just like the story and the peer work, they could put up their phone and each person can put that QR code on and be able to learn more about the Box of Joy. So it's just another way of deeper engagement. Father Bauer.
Yes, one of the things I've always enjoyed the annual report, and I think it really has a powerful message. And what I've done traditionally is after each assignment, I always send a thank you email to the pastor, and I'll also info all the key players in the parish as well. And I always attach a copy of the fiscal latest annual report to that. So that's just one of the ways of getting it out there.
What a fantastic deal. And it's just a link. So you wouldn't even be crowding up their inbox. You could do the hyperlink. For those that don't have it, the hyperlink is just the direction to a page instead of attaching the actual document. Because I think the one in my inbox is about 5 megabytes, which is fat, which is Ashton's laughing because it's kind of big. I mean, not that I care. I'm just saying some of you may care that it's a little big, and when you send it to a parish staff, if they don't have a good internet service, you're crushing their internet. But at the same time, if you sent them the hyperlink, they could go to the website and see it. So that's a great connection, Father Bauer. Thanks for sharing that. And something easily that helps broaden the story. Instead of just a thank you note, they might say, well, you know what? I've never considered our parish doing Box of Joy. Here it is. Boom. Right there. So good work. All right, I'm going to go back to sharing the screen, and I want to make sure that we get through at least the financials part here to show you before we jump into this next piece. Okay, so the financials part, right? So this is the opposite of the 5.97 is the 94.03. Which one do you like to be able to share? It's your preference. Here's my point. If you break it down to $1, 94 cents of your dollar is going to be able to help the poor, right? Or you could say 6% is left behind for the administrative. All of it, and here's my point, all of it is supporting the ministry. And the reason why I say that is I think it's important to be able to say not only we lean, but the 6% that it comes back to is 6% to help committed people serve the poor as jobs. Y'all, us, Ashton, right? This is the idea. It's also not wasted, but this is how good of a steward we are. So not only are we doing this with great ministry, with great people, but the money's also going, as we do it, we make that commitment. So it's almost a commitment on your end to say, hey, we're pushing this out because we know that this is an important part of us. And again, if you look at this balance sheet and the aid provided and you start to get overwhelmed, you can imagine giving them an audited report. This is why we don't give them an audited report. Some people may ask this question. I want to make sure file this under just teaching everybody. So don't think we're going to get too deep into the weeds. But most nonprofits, not all, and it's not required, their fiscal year ends June 30. Why June 30 is important is because by the time that money gets cut off and gets audited and it gets out, we're almost in June of 24. So you'd say, why the old numbers? Because you have to have a cutoff date to a fiscal year. The nonprofit reporting for Cross Catholic, like many nonprofits, including my own that I work with, our diocese here, is June 30th. That gets cut off. That then gets audited. That audited then gets pushed out into the documents. And so I share that just so that y'all know why, if somebody asks you why June 30th, well, because that's the fiscal year ending for Cross Catholic. Again, you may know that. I'm not insulting anyone's intelligence there just as much as you know that that's the nonprofit. Many nonprofits cut off for their financials. Okay, statement of activity is the same. You could say, here's the expenses of where it goes and how we're able to do that. Again, it's just a great way to be able to be transparent and to share that ownership. I thought it was a nice little contact and context for Jim to be able to have this in there, not only to be able to show you the co-founder and CEO, but also to be able to connect to Michelle and kind of their connection for the future, and that they're giving to an organization that's sustainable and continues to be able to pass on the gift. Obviously, the board of directors, so as people say, who's involved, the chairman, and being able to understand that that this is a true ministry of the church. And here's my last thing I want to share before we kind of break this down into other ways, is this idea that there's some good wording here that many organizations don't put. And I'm going to read it out loud just to be able to drive it home. But I think that this it's a really good spiritual context that you may want to adopt or utilize or steal. We consider under good stewardship, by the way, here, if you can't see it, we consider every gift we received as a precious resource from God. We direct every donation to its intended project, provide honest and accurate reports to our donors, and keep overhead costs to an industry low. We handle funds with utmost integrity and hold our ministry partners in the field to the same high standards by asking them to document costs and the impact of their outreach. Yo, that's beautiful. And I say that because that's a line worthy of being able to repeat, to share parishes, to drive home. We know that our mission drives us. And when we get into a nonprofit, if we don't take time like today to be able to examine our mission, our connection, and what that means fleshed out, this good stewardship line is really a way to open up and flourish as a ministry based on our mission. I don't know if any of y'all have committed the mission to memory, but the mobilizing the global Catholic Church is a fantastic way to be able to transform the poor and the communities materially and spiritually for the glory of Jesus Christ. There's a powerful line in that. And so when we talk about the annual report, all of that annual report and all these stories and all the financials and all the ownership should come through the lens of that one line, the mission. And so when that mission drives home, we're able to judge and pass through all of our conversations through that mission. And when we have lines like the good stewardship that affirm that, it gives you words to not only be proud of this ministry, but to be able to invite people with not only with confidence, I would say with boldness. The difference between confidence and boldness is that you're proclaiming the gospel with boldness because we know that we've been committed to this. And when you've been committed to this as an organization for all these years. And that as the mission is something that you could really get behind, hold up a flag and stand proud of. Okay, Father Dave.
No, actually, Ashton's first. Her hand was up first.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ashton. I didn't see it. Go ahead.
That's okay. If you could just scroll back up to the pie chart, there's actually some wording there that is the preferred wording for Jim doesn't really want us using the 94 cents of a dollar phrasing. So if you can scroll back up to there, it has kind of a couple sentences that is the preferred wording to use.
Right there?
Right
Yes.
there, not more than 94% of all organizational expenses, including donated goods. So it's not only finances, it's goods in
Right.
kind. If I can support Ashton, Ashton can really speak to this more than I can. But he doesn't want us saying that 94 cents of every dollar, because that could actually get us in trouble. That's not really true. But this is the preferred way of speaking about it. So.
Ashton, did you want to add anything to that?
No, that was basically it. The wording's there. So if we can try to say something close to that, that would be helpful. And we do have this kind of one-page sheet going out to with the pie graph on it as well. So that way you can carry it kind of with you.
Sure.
To your speaking opportunities.
To expand that one more way, and again, the only other way that you would share that, and I'm going to go back up to the top just so you could see and I guess what I was meaning by the dollar, so don't take me literally, obviously, with the dollar comment, but it's the idea that if you're you could either take the conversation from the 5.9% conversation or the 94.03. And this is what I was meaning up here. You see the 5.97, the percentage of expenses used for overhead costs. So which way to you is more powerful to be able to share that with someone, knowing that inside of the expenses for overhead costs, some people like to be able to say it in the opposite way. And so wherever you find your voice in that, if it's that 5.97 or this 94.03%, either way, I think as long as you kind of contextualize it with this wording instead of that dollar, yes. But if you contextualize it in this way, it drives it home, because I know some people like to kind of use each angle of that conversation. Patrick?
Corey, after Patrick, Corey, can I jump back in? Because that wasn't my point. I just supported.
Go ahead.
I'll circle back after Patrick.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. No worries.
Patrick, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was going to let you go first, Father Dave.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, it's real important, that wording that Ashton brought up. the organization I worked for before was sued by the state of California for using the dollar word, because the majority of what comes in is gifts in kind. And so it gives an inappropriate, and not intentionally, but it gives an inappropriate perception to the donor. But it's just the universal
Yeah, no doubt.
accounting that, is out there, but, the state of California took exception to it.
And just since we're there, this is not insulting anyone's intelligence. Just to be clear, what Patrick's meaning by gifts in kind is the actual donated goods. Like if somebody donated, just say a satchel of food, that's a gift in kind to the organization, not necessarily where a lot of times that gets a little confusing, saying, well, what's a gift in kind? A gift in kind is actually when they're donating the good, not just the money to buy the good, where the organization has to go buy the good itself.
And also too, it could be plumbing supplies, if putting for wells or bathrooms,
Exactly, yeah.
roofing, or it could be, I know someone has donated solar panels for the top of our wells. So all those things are gifts in kind. Corey, I just want to go back.
It's also when people donate $50 to ship $4,000 worth of goods in kind, food from the warehouses, right? So $100 shipping $8,000 worth of goods in kind. So we get the credit for $8,000 donation.
The same thing with the $9 that goes for a box of joy. That's also gift in kind.
Yeah.
Same thing. But Corey, I just wanted to go back and say thanks for talking about our mission. We're doing a lot of internal work here regarding both our mission and our values with our staff. And the word empowering there is really important, because I think for the preachers, it's really powerful too, because not only are we're empowering the parishioners that are listening to the homily, to the preaching, but also to the fact that, the poor have a way of empowering us. If you think about it, really what they do is they help us, meaning us collectively in the church, they help us save our souls. The way we respond to them helps us to save our souls. So the word empowering really needs to be unpacked in a lot of different ways. And actually, the Dominicans, we used to have a master of the order who used to very famously always say to the members of the order, the poor have a way of preaching back to us if we're humble enough to receive it. And so really it's kind of mission in more than one direction. Sometimes it's mission in reverse. So, and that's so important, because it's not just about mobilizing the people in front of us. Mobilization happens in a variety of ways, and it happens, and that's really what true evangelization is. How do we mobilize? How do we equip, the disciples for the ministry, basically? And it happens a variety of ways. So thanks for bringing that up. It's really important.
Yes, indeed. Father Allen, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, if we could go back to that pie chart, one of the things I liked, and if you study the pie charts of other organizations, they kind of like to say, this is our administrative expenses, and this is our fundraising. And I remind people, I says, fundraising is an administrative expense. And I like that you've conjoined the two.
No doubt. No doubt. That's a, no, and it isn't, it's a powerful way to be able to say, and I think that's why I really like, some people can get caught in the numbers. We could get caught in the numbers. The numbers are really good to be able to tell the story. But really, what I love about this last part about the good stewardship is that we consider every gift a precious resource from God. Like that claiming that when they give a gift to you, to Cross, that Cross really values that there's a deep impact that you consider there. And so you can share that as an OP in your preaching when you're making that ask, that we consider every gift that you give a precious resource from God. There's nothing in no audience better to be able to share that within the Catholic Church. I can promise you, the majority of your Catholic parishes are not speaking like that to their parishioners. And I'm not saying that they are not capable of it, but they don't talk like that. And so it could be very refreshing when you're making an ask to speak in this language, because it's inviting, because it's empowering of how much you treasure and value the impact that's going to happen with their giving. And that is just not something that happens typically. And so in many ways, one fruit of your labor in preaching and inviting the giving to cross is that you could help possibly shift the way that the priests currently talk about giving in their parish. Just by having a way of like, man, this is insightful, this is empowering, this is beautiful, it's bold, it's what we do to be able to help open this conversation up. I'm going to transition. I know we're into a couple of things that I wanted to be able to at least make sure we've covered a lot, but I wanted to make sure that we talked about the necessary part of inside of this conversation about amplifying the message and unifying our message. So what does it mean to be able to amplify the message? And then how are we going to do that to be able to invite others in? The amplifying the message, the point I wanted to bring home, and I know we're getting at a point where it's like the mental capacity, you can't hold it anymore. So just get me out on this one point. We're not expected to remember all these numbers. We're not expected to remember all these stories. We're not expected to be able to do that, but we do have tools, communication tools, to be able to help us break this open. And so just like, just like Father Allen said, he sends them the report in that way. It's being able to figure out ways to integrate this message, this annual report into one of your tools in your toolbox. And I think that would be the shift that I would say that happens in the most granular level in a nonprofit on the ground. Don't let the waste of this great communication piece, don't let the communication piece go to waste, I should say, in a better way to be able to put that where it's like, it just is on the shelf until next year. You can mention this in your talking of like saying, well, we put out an annual report. I invite you to go online and look at it. It's a way of invitation to this piece so that it doesn't feel like it's just a book on a shelf. If you want to learn more about the story or hear other stories, go to our website, our annual report's there. These are the things that we try to engage on to be the most impactful, most transparent ministry in the church. In some ways, it might sound like bragging. And really, in the most ways, to the ear of the Pew Catholic, it's going to be refreshing to be able to hear someone speak that way, to be invited to be able to speak that way, and for your voice to be amplified in a much more global impact. And that annual report is such a great piece to do that. And y'all all have the tool there by them investing in the right way, these emotive pictures, this really well done professional piece that's going to be at your fingertips. My last is this, and I'll say this as just a way that I wanted to make sure that when you have an annual report, annual reports tend to be able to be good hooks into an invitation, especially for first-time givers. And what I mean by that is this. We know that inside of giving, that you can't make a major gift most of the time unless you make an introductory gift and give Cross the chance to be able to earn their trust in their impact and their generosity, to be able to amplify their giving, to be able to increase the size they're giving. And what happens is you could use this annual report as a way to be able to say, if you've never given a gift inside of your pitch, inside of your ask, if you've never given a gift to Cross, I'd ask for your trust to be able to give us a chance to impact the poor with your gift. Let us show you how we are really good stewards and are able to be able to bring this gift to fruition to such a great audience and impact across the church. And an annual report does that because it's an easy way for those that get over the hump of doubt. Most of the time what they say, what is the restriction of a first-time donor? It's most of the time, can I trust this organization? And this annual report is a great gift of trust to be able to share, just like the brochure. And it's almost a plea. I'd ask you to trust us with this gift. If you've never given us a gift, And then what you're doing is you're inviting a different level of gift. You're also doing, this is in addition, I get it, y'all are juggling a lot of balls of your pitch. But inside of that, you're asking the question for those that are on the outside that haven't got into the cross world yet, to be able to say, trust us with his gift. I think you'll see from the giving to the poor that we want to be able to partner with you for the poor, and it's a necessary piece. And I think that kind of invitation with such a professional piece will not only bring more donors in, but it'll also help people feel more comfortable that giving to Cross is not just some fancy deal, but really is part of a Catholic ministry, this really large part, an important part, integral part of the very mission we serve, which is the mission that we shared about. So I'll wrap up there because we have questions. I know we're getting close on time. Any insight, input, feedback? I know we've kind of done it along the way, and I wanted to be able to do it along the way. But any other feedback or insight as we kind of move forward using this annual report? I want to give a shout out to the Cross team, the communications team. I don't even know who they are. They did a great job with it. To all those that have given stories and support to them, from Ashton, Father Dave, Father Bernard, all those pieces that y'all have kind of given back to them. The feedback, Patrick, all those kind of things make it important for them to do it. And I would share that same call to you, the OPs. Feel free, if you have an idea of a story or if you have something, use that communication back. I think from a communications team side, they don't want to create an annual report without feedback from the team. And so I hopefully open that door back to them to be able to help make it important. But open it up for comments, questions, thoughts, concerns.
This is Father Kunzman.
Yes, sir.
I just need to remind everyone, we have 15 minutes on Sunday to give a homily on the readings and a homily on cross.
I know.
All the things everyone's saying is absolutely wonderful, but how do we put it together in just a very short time?
What you just talked about, Father Kunzman, is probably the Rubik's Cube of OP preaching. I mean, it's one of the hardest equations to kind of put together for it to line up. No doubt, it's one of my most humble ways that I sit here and share creative and unique ways to say things and to be able to ask and to know that you have such a short leash to do it and to be able to give the Gospels the honor. I sit in honor when I watch y'all's preaching and what y'all do to be able to connect those dots. And no doubt, I think that that's the lifelong challenge of what an OP does. Father Dave?
Richard, you raise a really good point. The other thing is, though, not all this should be in your homily. Some of this might happen over coffee and donuts in between Mass, or at the door of the church, or maybe if someone takes you out to dinner or lunch or whatever it is. So not all of this should be in your homily, but there's a lot that you can preach outside of the pulpit, right? So there's lots of ways, and this is here just to inform your homily. So I don't think you have to be overburdened by it. It's just to inform you.
And maybe one other point, I've seen some of this broken up into the introductory, making a couple points at the opening of Mass, making a couple points at the end of Mass, that there's a couple ways that you could kind of weave in a couple of these points that also might not necessarily be donuts, but also just other points in the Mass. But absolutely, to Father Dave's point, is if you feel the stress of it, then you kind of lose the joy of the message too. So it's a unique balance, no doubt about it, Father Kunzman. Any other comments? Yeah, Patrick, go ahead, jump in.
Yeah, it's been my experience that numbers are given at the door or over coffee. The story is what you do, during Mass, the story that touches their heart. But the numbers are just, if there's a question, credibility, that's at the door, that's at dinner, or that's over coffee. But numbers alone are not going to turn hearts. It's your story that turns the heart.
Yeah, there's no doubt that that the story is going to catch their heart, and that numbers will support it. And I do think that that's part of why we don't just do a checklist for you to say you have to cover these things, because it's the old the science and the art of it. That is there's got to be some science to it to be able to make sure it kind of fits, but then there's the art of it, the storytelling and the pieces to be able to bring emotion. That do bring that in. Father Carlos.
Just amazed what the annual report does, because I was looking at or thinking about the images of the people impacted with our work. The annual report, when people talk about it, I see that kind of same smile, that they're able to participate and look at a broader picture. And I believe it does its work, because the comments I receive about the annual report are really impacting. I just wanted to.
You just brought something to mind, like, you know, the same smile that they have is the smile that you can have in giving, you know,
Right.
and being able to join them in that smile. You know, there's something humanistic to touch, to feel connected to them. I like that.
Corey, I think it's also important to note too, and maybe this could be a talk for another time, that our Marcom people have made a decision several years ago about the type of photographs we use.
Yeah.
We're not using photographs like other charities do of a snotty old dirty kid begging in the street. We're trying to make sure that the photos show the dignity of the human person. You know, not that we give it, that we help them enhance it. So they're joyful, you know, they're intentional, the photos we use. So it's not about making people feel guilty. It's also about raising up the poor, so that if the poor saw their photo in our magazine, they wouldn't be embarrassed to have their photo be in our.
It's a really good point. It's a really good point. Yeah, no doubt that's a unique piece that this exudes joy, exudes the hope that we want to provide in our giving. You know, not using the poor just to be able to tell a story for our own sake. Okay, well, with that, a deep and sincere gratitude for the rest of Lent, for you to be able to have a fruitful Lent, the rest of Lent, and an admiration for what you do as you go out there and preach. I hope this was a resource. Thank you all for your contributions, your conversations, and until next time, a big thank you.
Thank you, Corey.
Thank you, Corey. Appreciate you. Bye,
All right,
everyone.
y'all.